Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Comics Evolve, where we discuss all things around comics media culture with your hosts, Andy, Jarian, and Alex.
Welcome to Comics Evolve with myself, Jarian Gibson.
And I'm Alex Straub.
And I almost messed up the intro. It's just Alex and I again today. Hopefully we will get Andy back soon. But right now it's just us two. Maybe we'll see someone from the others from the group join as well. We put the invitation out. But yeah, we're back this week. The kickoff of X-Men 97, the first two episodes. But before we get into that, what's been going on with you, Alex?
Not much. I've been on an Avatar: The Last Airbender kick recently. I love that universe, and I've just been reading some stuff. So, like, I read The Search recently, which is kind of like a comic that they did. Takes place after the animated show. Still haven't watched the live-action show yet, but I will at some point. And yeah, watched these two episodes of X-Men today, actually. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, nothing too much else, you know.
Yeah, here Friday, was it Friday? Yeah, Friday night, my wife and I watched the remake of Roadhouse. And I thought it was really good. You know, it's a pretty good modern take. Jake Gyllenhaal definitely kind of embraced that role, and you know, if you've seen some of his movies, you know that Jake Gyllenhaal and Patrick Swayze both worked together on Donnie Darko. So they do have some history there. But I think he got some of the nice guy stuff down really well. It wasn't like a complete kind of the same if you're expecting the Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. It's not the exact same. You know, there is a double deuce like bar in there, but it's a totally different demographic. But I thought Jake Gyllenhaal did pretty well in this role. And I think it was probably, for me, one of his top four roles, you know, being Donnie Darko, Nightcrawler, Mysterio, and then now Roadhouse. Conor McGregor, man, he's straight crazy in this film. It's like, you know, zero regards, you know, zero F's given, zero anything. He was just on it, and yeah, so
I saw I saw a trailer for that movie, or like an ad for it on TV, and I saw Conor McGregor, and I was like, what? And it totally, like, I was not focused on it at all, but it instantly diverted my attention to it, so I'll have to check that out. Also, another one of his favorite roles that, for me personally, is the Bubble Boy. I will never forget him as the Bubble Boy.
That is a funny movie. Yeah,
it is a great movie. So,
and then yesterday, me, the wife, and the kids, we all went and saw Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire. My daughter really enjoyed it, and you know, certain things it's kind of hard with her, depending if it's outside of what she likes. But she really enjoyed it. It was a good, fun movie. You know, as Pepper says, Pepper from Dodgeball. You know, that's been good, clean family fun. It definitely is. I really liked it. I thought it was a good continuation of the last one, Afterlife movie. And just seeing that, and it was interesting to see where they go next with this story.
Yeah, so I've never been the biggest Ghostbusters fan. I don't know why, but I do want to see this movie because I've heard some pretty decent things about it, and yeah, it seems like it's pretty good.
For those of you that are on with us today, for some reason the chat looks stuck, so we'll see what happens if it catches up. So if I don't see your chat, sorry about that today, but we'll keep pushing through. But yeah, it looked pretty good. My son is all in to go see Godzilla X Kong next weekend, so looking forward to that. I'm trying to think, were there any other good previews out there? Borderlands looks really good. So yeah. We saw the trailer, you know, because we went and saw the movie in XD here. It's not quite IMAX, but it's XD. It's got the bigger screen, the effects, the audio, and they have like those special seats that can move. We didn't get those because, you know, my son wouldn't even pay attention to the movie if we got those seats. But we saw on the big screen. That looks pretty good. So looking forward to go see that, you know, from the writers of Venom and Spider-Man, it said in the trailer. Kate Blanchett looks pretty good in the role as well. So looking forward to it.
Did you ever play the Borderlands games by any chance?
It has been, but it's been so long that I don't think I can really remember most of it.
I barely even played one, and to be honest, I don't remember anything, but I do recognize one of those characters from that game is in that movie, and he looks so spot on. So, it's something that I think personally I would definitely watch at some point, because it's like, even though I was never the biggest fan of Borderlands, it looks really good.
Yeah,
And
looks fun.
the way that they made the film, it looks great, like in comparison to like the video game. So
It kind of has that Suicide Squad vibes in a way, in the way it was shot and filmed. In a way, it looks like to me. So,
definitely.
one thing I did bust out today. So this is not a new shirt, but I haven't worn it yet. So this is my, since we're talking about X-Men 97, broke out the the X gonna give it to you sweater today.
Dude,
I was gonna save this.
awesome.
Yeah, thanks. I was gonna save it for the actual MCU live action X-Men, but X-Men 97 is so good. Those first 2 episodes, and I'm glad they gave us 2, because the end of that second episode was like, where are they going with this? And so, let's get into it. It's you look at the first episode coming right out. You see the new Marvel animation start going, and they bust right into that iconic X-Men theme, and you notice the mix. The one thing I noticed too is the whole mix of 2D and 3D in this to kind of make the visuals slightly better than the original series, but still paying the same kind of homage to that series as well.
Yeah, it kind of gives it depth almost, I think a little bit more than it had before. And one of the most interesting things to me was I didn't think I was going to like it at first, right? Like, so, I don't remember. It's been so long since I've watched the original series, but I remember a lot of how it looks. And it's like, in comparison, it does look pretty on par, but better, in my opinion, because it gives it sort of like you said, a 3D kind of look to something that I think honestly it adds another layer to this show for X-Men 97. They did a really good job on the animation. It's not the same as What If, but it's kind of like blending the animation styles together in a way.
Oh, I can see the chat. So there's RMC there. Listening to us while he's working today. Hopefully it's not too hot or too cool out. It's actually kind of been a little chilly here in my neck of the woods, and I'm just a little bit southwest of you. So I can see the chat. That's good. I just can't do anything in the chat right now, it looks like. But yeah, I definitely agree with the depth and how they did the animation style, and it is a little bit different than What If, and it's making me want to see what they're going to do next, especially with some Marvel Zombie stuff coming, which I have some news about that too when we get to that. But the 2 biggest things I noticed here is that right off the bat, they're doing Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, properly. It's not, it's a complete, to me, 180 from what we saw in the X-Men films and in the 2 different franchises that the Fox had, where it's like he's front and center. He's a leader. That dive off the plane, kind of give me vibes of Captain America and Winter Soldier when he jumped off in the beginning to go to that ship, and they're like, "Where's his chute?" He doesn't have one.
Well, that scene where the Sentinel grabs him and pulls him out of the plane, and he just like turns and cuts its arm off and gets free and everything. That was such a great scene, animated. I love the way they did that and how everybody kind of dispersed and then kind of went into action. This is a really good sequence there. I really like what they did with the falling and then having Scott shoot his optic blast straight into the ground to stop himself. It's just I did not expect that to happen at first, but
And then there's that one scene where they're saving what it's gonna look like is Sunspot from the new mutant hunter people, the FO people, what they call them, on their hats and stuff, where they take off his visor. He goes, "Oh no, don't do that." Don't do that, which they don't fail to realize is that visor is keeping him from just blasting everyone with his eyes open, and he blasts them and gets his visor back. And then you get to the whole thing where they're at the UN for the trial of Magneto to see about him and the whole fighting there, and just the words he's saying, how he's acting the entire episodes. You can tell that he's really taken the mantle and the vision of what Professor X wanted. And what he did for the X-Men is so long, and with Cyclops being one of the longest tenured X-Men, even from the original team with Jean, you see how he's turned into that Professor X figure.
What bothers me the most about Cyclops in the first 2 episodes is the fact that he wants to leave because he's having a child, and they don't really want to raise that child in that environment, which is understandable. Kind of living in an area with their target on their back, more or less, but then at the same time, as soon as Magneto makes his appearance, he's like, well, maybe Professor X didn't think I was the right choice. I said, well, you're about to leave. Like, like, obviously, like, you're about to leave. So it was one of those things to me, like, Scott Summers has done right, but he's definitely still like, I just want to punch him, sometimes.
Yeah.
It's just like he thinks one way and then does the opposite. And it's like he's complaining that the X-Men aren't good enough, like out there playing basketball, but then he's still planning on leaving. So it's like, like I don't get it. But yeah, I mean the other characters, I really like Morph in the first episodes. I thought like him and Wolverine and some of their dialogue in the episodes were great. Just seeing kind of like, them in that party scene. I think it was the second episode with Jubilee using her powers like glow sticks.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. That they did such a great job with some of the animation in this, because it, like I said, like with Jubilee using her powers, it was one of those things where it kind of like, I think, gave like a depth to what she was doing, and it really like kind of, it looked more realistic than the other. I know it's still animation, but
but you could definitely tell the effects when she used her powers to do the glow sticks things, how it changed and it kind of had that 3D effect on them.
Yeah, it's like there's a scene in this show where Magneto moves that book that's the last living will and testament of Charles Xavier to Cyclops, I think it was, and it goes across the room, and there's like metal in the corners and like metal in the binding, and all of that glows and it stands out. And like I just thought that was a nice little, like, the way that it did, it really like pointed that out to us, like as a viewer. It like added more depth to it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it was really cool because the whole time he did that, whenever he used his powers, you saw that glow around them to kind of help identify, what he was doing, especially when the UN came to arrest him, and they're like, our weapons are modified, you can't do anything. It's like, oh yeah, but your helicopter still can, that was pretty cool, saying like, look, you have to be totally non-metal materials around him, or he's going to find some way to still beat you.
Well, and that was such a great scene too, because it's like, obviously like you've got Magneto kind of seeming like he's going to be kind of like hard to deal with at that moment. And he just kind of drops his arms and is like, puts the copters down and is like, all right, I'll go with you. Like, slap a collar on me. Let's go. And it's like, we know there's some sort of long game here. I mean, like, knowing Magneto as a character, like, there has to be, right? So it's like, I know they're not going to reveal it in the first 2 episodes, but it's definitely going to be one of those things where I'm just curious how long this goes, where it seems like he's on everybody's side, and he's really not.
How long it goes, and how far is Mystique behind him, or is she in plain sight this entire time as well? Because, whenever there is Magneto, there's always Mystique somewhere. And is she the UN ally that they've been talking to? Was she the other Jean that showed up at the end of episode 2? Or was that Madeline Pryor as well? Because we all know that from reports that Mr. Sinister is the villain of this show. And he's the one that I believe is if I remember correctly, is involved with the creation of Madeline Pryor also. So who is it? Or was that the real Jean? And maybe that's someone else, an imposter the whole time. But she used her powers though too. But it was interesting to where when she did use her powers, it was like, okay, I will use them, and then when she got trapped, when they found Trask, that kind of thing, and her powers kind of led her to Trask in the desert. But then also too, she wouldn't use her powers to check on Magneto on his intentions, even though he doesn't have the helmet anymore. And so that's also interesting as well. So I wonder what's going on here. Is she a clone with similar powers, not the full powers, or was that the clone at the door?
I feel like she's probably Madeline Pryor. That's probably like, the clone kind of type thing of Jean Grey. It's going to be one of those, like, what's going on here? Everybody's going to be really confused. But then they're going to probably find out that, Mr. Sinister is behind this. And, I feel like we're going to have a slow burn kind of getting to him, where like everything that's been happening so far is leading up to that. But I'm just really curious to see if it was Mystique. It would be really interesting, because then it would feel like this is all tied to maybe framing something that Magneto is playing long term here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, it can go 2 different ways with that, with that scene. So really interested to see what happens.
And back to your comment on Morph. Yes, Morph is one of the shining things of the series as well. You know, when Morph shapeshifts, especially that fight at the UN where he came in as Psylocke he came in as Colossus, and then he to save Scott, and then or Cyclops, and then he transformed into Psylocke. That was a pretty cool scene, and just seeing how they use Morph in fights and that kind of stuff. And it was funny because my son's asking, I thought Morph was dead. I thought Morph was dead. I'm like, yes, Morph died early in the original series, but then was brought back to life and mind controlled by Mr. Sinister in that early series as well. Because my son was all confused seeing Morph involved and all that kind of stuff. So that was a pretty cool scene of fight. And then the one more thing I want to say about Morph is at the very end of the second episode, when Wolverine's up in the tree, especially after, you know, we'll get to Storm here in a second. You know, he throws Morph throws chips and beer up at Wolverine, and then all of a sudden Morph shapeshifts into or transforms into Sabretooth, and all of a sudden you see Wolverine's face, and they go at it. So it's pretty cool to see how Morph is doing this and has some powers. Mark here from the chat says Morph has some dope powers. Yes, that's pretty cool, and it's interesting too that if they're letting Morph have the powers of the people he shapeshifts into, will Mystique have the same powers like that as well, or be completely different? Is my wondering in this series when we get to her.
One of my favorite moments was when they were all falling and he changed into like Angel.
Oh yes,
down and grabbed somebody. I was just like, wow, that was perfect. It was kind of like one of those things where it was like everybody kind of knew what to do in that moment. And yeah, Morph's just got like, you know, even him walking around in that party environment that was like a rave or whatever. He's like talking to Wolverine, and he's like walking around him and changing forms and talking to him and everything. And I thought that was really awesome. He's just giving Wolverine kind of hard time, but kind of like also him and Wolverine are friends. So it's like, you know, they're kind of friendly. He's giving him a friendly hard time. Almost, you know, so, yeah. And that's kind of where that moment gets dropped that, you know, like Jean and Scott are most likely going to lead the X-Men. And it's like, you know, we've seen that, but like nobody else really seems to know that yet. But Wolverine's kind of picked up on it. So
yeah.
So
the other big shining here we go. From Mark, here we get this next one. Mark again from the chat. Also, Ro can copy the expertise of humans. So interesting, might be my new favorite power. So yes, that was pretty cool, especially when Jean was going into labor and the doctor would not perform on her because he thinks she's dangerous and he'll get hurt during her delivery. So Scott's like, hey, just go ahead and, you know, get his, you know, take his power to be a doctor or whatever and learn from him. And that way you can reform it. She does that, and all of a sudden, boom, 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 she's ordering people around to get the baby born.
My favorite part about that scene was he was like, you know, like you might, like, I forget exactly what he says, but he says something like you might, you know, cause damage or something like that. And like while Wolverine's driving Jean Grey, she has like a contraction and rips the roof off of his car and it goes flying. And I was just literally like, wow, I don't know if that's like her getting revenge for like him giving Scott's car, like turning it into a convertible.
Good point.
Or if that's like her kind of proving that right. Cause like Jean Grey is incredibly powerful. So like, you know, like her just like having a contraction, ripping the roof off the car. It's like, oh no. So it's like, you know, they're not technically wrong, I guess, but you know, like it's one of those funny things where it all went back to giving Scott Summers a convertible for Wolverine to me. And that made me just have a little bit of a laugh. So,
but the biggest surprise, or not the biggest surprise, well, partial surprise, but the biggest standout besides Cyclops was Storm, right? Especially when, you know, she comes in, especially during that first fight scene where they're rescuing the kid. But then when they're in the desert with the Sentinels, and that Prime Sentinel kind of stands up and he kind of does a little earpiece thing and brings her in, and they're like Omega level mutant incoming, you know, they're all like, here comes the big one, and how she defeats all of them, but just her, and then her self-sacrifice to save Magneto from that weapon that they had that was basically a magnified version of the collars they used to dampen their powers. And then she loses her powers, and that was just like so strong, especially with her saying, I can't feel the elements, I can't feel the wind, I can't feel the rain. You know, that was a pretty sad scene, but there's precedence for that in the comics where that helped her become an even better leader before getting her powers back later on.
Yeah. Yeah, I really liked that scene. It's weird because it kind of like makes you kind of agree with Magneto at that moment when that
Hmm.
happens, because he's like, was this the plan all along and everything like that. Still, I think he's got his own kind of like goal. Of course, Storm was trying to be heroic and save him and everything like that. But, it did make me start to think, like, I wonder if he would still be in that position had he would be hit, like, and
Hmm.
had no powers. Would he stay where he was, or would something have happened? Um, but it's obviously one of those things where I feel like Hank's gonna figure out a way to
Yeah.
reverse that, turn it around. Maybe that happens later on at the end of the series and everything, but it was either the episode before or in the same episode, Storm has like a really great moment where she's telling Jean like how great her powers like made her feel once she came there and kind of flourished and was, living with Xavier, and Xavier was like helping her and everything. So they kind of have that moment, and then that happens to her, and I feel like that makes it just a little bit more powerful, because it's like, her powers kind of became part of her identity at that point. And then once she loses them, like, she doesn't even want to say bye to everybody. She's like too afraid, so she
From the
leaves.
chat here with Mark, does everyone else hate FO as much as I do? Yes, we all do, because they're pretty much straight bigots. And back to Storm, that letter though that she wrote that left for Jean, and she left for Jean only, and Jean reading to the group, and we see Storm driving off. I wonder where that's going to go. I wonder if we get any storylines of Storm going to other places like Wakanda, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or where does she go? Or also, too, when her powers start coming back, do we get a scene like we saw with Magneto in the Fox movies where he could move the chess piece a little bit after he got his powers taken away from the shots? And we see
Mm-hmm.
her with like a little bit of like lightning in her fingers, kind of hinting that she's getting her powers back. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see where she goes, and who she interacts with while she's gone and left the X-Men. But also
Mm-hmm.
too, speaking of Beast, and you said Beast will find a way. There was a little Easter egg in there. I believe it was that was it Muir that they mentioned in there, and I believe that's a research facility that is created by Moira Taggart, which we all know Moira has that connection to the X-Men from the early days, and we saw them in the second round of X-Men movies as well. So that was an interesting Easter egg there when talking about that in the research that Jean wanted Hank to send the powers off to, or to the DNA off to see what's going on with her cells and her DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. The other thing here, speaking of Magneto, I thought at that moment when he saw what happened with Storm that he was going to turn back to his own ways and go ham on everyone, and they
Yeah,
thought
it
it
kind of
too.
felt that way,
Yeah,
like, at first.
yeah, it felt that way. He took him up and he said, then he invoked what Charles taught him and the view of the Earth, and saying that we're all on this planet together, this and that, and because he could have just basically ended all of them right there, but he didn't. And he took them back down to Earth, and interesting to see where things go. But I definitely think there's some long game con here going on, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
Magneto knows something else that he hasn't divulged yet to the rest of the group.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like Magneto is one of those that, like, even when he's not trying to hurt you, he's kind of trying to hurt you. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's always kind of playing some game. It's just you never really know what it is. And I mean, like, it seems like he wants Genosha as part of the UN.
Yep.
So, like, that's something. So I thought at first, like, oh, maybe he did this to stand trial to kind of be like the leader of Genosha and then get them on the UN. And, kind of like, I feel like there's some sort of long game here. I don't know if it's to like get all the mutants to Genosha and then try and turn them all against humanity. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
some kind of
Start a
idea like
war.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because like the first thing that he does is when he's going on his like exploits of doing heroic things, he saves humans, but then he's also saving mutants too. So, and he tells the mutants that he saves that he's going to send them to Genosha, and
The
he's made
Morlocks.
the arrangements. Yep, and they're the Morlocks. And he's like, I've already made the arrangements. You won't feel like you have to live like an outcast anymore, and you can go to Genosha. And yeah, I feel like that's kind of his goal, is he's going to try and like direct all the mutants to Genosha. And yeah.
Yeah. But we also noticed too at the end him and Rogue touching, right? So, and that's also a precedence in the comics too, because they had a relationship in the comics. I think, was it an alternate universe or some storyline. I have to go back and check, but I remember them having some kind of relationship briefly in the comics as well. And interesting too that she can touch him because of his powers and the field around him, I guess, without actually causing him any harm. And then you kind of saw there a little bit of jealousy at the end there with Gambit about that. So I wonder how that's going to play into things going too as well going forward.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's some sort of past there. And I mean, not to mention, you know, you see the little spark in between their hands and everything like that. And it's like for somebody like Magneto, he made a very compelling case, and he went to the UN about like why he was, you know, he lived such a terrible life in the beginning, and he felt like an outcast. Yeah, so it's like he does have that. As much as you dislike him as a person, he does have like a very compelling story that like makes you not hate him 100% right off the bat. I don't think any of the X-Men really like hate Magneto. They just are just worried he's gonna bite them at some point and, you know, be like an issue for them.
Yep.
At what point does that happen? But yeah, I mean, like it seems like right now he's putting on a good front of changing his ways and going to the UN and hearing his story about like, you know, just everything about his childhood and everything. I don't know. I thought that was a really powerful moment, and this show's done that really great, where there's like, I think the plot's pretty solid because it's like very emotionally driven things are happening in this show. So
the one thing that cracked me up, speaking of Gambit, was when we saw the food being cooked, it was Gambit cooking. And I keep thinking about to the original season, I think Gene's cooking Thanksgiving dinner or something, I remember. And he tasted it. He's like, this ain't got no seasoning. And they kind of got into it in the kitchen. And it's funny because in this episode 1 or 2, when the food's being made, he's making the food. He's making beignets, right? And so he was the one making the food. I was cracking up laughing when they showed that because my mind just flashed back to that whole scene with Gene and him in the kitchen. He's talking about the food not being seasoned. So,
and I think the best part about it too was like not only was he like making food, but he didn't go on the mission to stay and make food, you know, like so like that just made me kind of like chuckle a little bit. Like, you didn't need me, I needed to be here cooking. Like, okay, you know.
Yeah, as this series goes forward, I'm looking forward to what happens next week, especially with the cliffhanger there at the end of the second episode about the second Jean showing up. You know, is she the real Jean? Is she a clone from Mr. Sinister? Is it Mystique? Is Mystique the one UN lady? You know, who, I can't remember the UN lady's name, so I'm going blank here, but you know, when are we going to see some of those other characters show up? Are we going to see a Mystique? Are we going to see a Juggernaut? Are we going to see a real Sabretooth? Are we going to see Colossus? Are we going to see Nightcrawler? You know, when are we going to see some of these other characters come into the story? Will that be something we'll see in later seasons? Mark from the chat here, Gambit's crop top is amazing. Yeah, the outfits and stuff like that. Yeah, it's definitely amazing there.
I'm curious to see how like Mr. Sinister being a villain in this might go into like being involved with other characters like Morph, and if like that is potentially something that like maybe Magneto's part of, you know, like maybe there's like something going on behind the scenes where it's like there's been some sort of deal or something made, you know, who knows. But it is weird that we'll say Madeline Pryor or the clone, whatever we want to call her, that shows up, Mystique, that happens right after Magneto shows up and takes over. Like it almost feels like that was like almost perfect timing, and when things are kind of utterly in chaos, it was something more that adds to that chaos moving forward.
Especially after that conversation with Magneto and Scott about Scott and Jean leaving, and then, you know, Scott saying, you know, Charles trusted you, I trust Charles, so that's where we're at right now. And then that scene happening, because I think they were kind of, were they in the midst, I gotta go back and watch again, were they in the midst of leaving at that point? When that clone showed up?
No,
they were staying because of Storm left. They were staying. Yeah.
So like Jean told Storm that she was gonna stay until they figured out what was going on with her powers, and then like Jean goes into her room or whatever and like finds Storm's note and finds out that she left, and then Jean goes down and they read the note, and they're basically talking about like what Storm said about how she didn't feel like herself. She had like lost part of her identity more or less since she lost her powers. And, you know, her powers had become kind of a huge part of who she identified herself as. So she didn't really feel like she belonged there, I guess, and she was leaving. And yeah, that's when suddenly somebody else appears that doesn't really belong there. So it's really interesting to see how that moves forward. There's so many different ways they could take that, to be honest. And if it was Mystique, that would be like crazy. They could have like Mystique impersonate Madeline Pryor. Like that would be something kind of interesting. So who knows?
Before we get on to the news, any more closing thoughts on X-Men 97?
No, I'm just really happy with the animation. It's pretty solid. Plot was great. I think I liked this better than the original version of the show that they made. Not that it's bad, but I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it all. Because I haven't seen much of it recently. I watched it so many years ago, and I just don't remember much of it. But yeah, I think in comparison, I like this show better animation style than the previous one.
Yeah, I would agree as well. I'm looking forward to where this goes this season. They've already got season 2 done. It looks like they're already working on season 3. I'm interested to see. I thought Sunspot was interesting, bringing it in so early on in the series, and the reluctance to use his powers, and just the way he carried himself. So I wonder if we're going to see more Sunspots. It kind of seemed like Sunspot and Jubilee kind of had that connection a little bit.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see if we do see more Sunspot going forward in this series and what kind of impact, because basically he has some pretty cool powers, right? Because he's solar powered. He's, strength. I think he can fly. All that kind of stuff. And when he turns like full on Sunspot, he looks pretty cool too as well. So interesting to see where they go with that and what kind of role that Sunspot will play in this series going forward.
Yeah, and I feel like for somebody that probably feels pretty similar, like she claims she does in the episode, I mean, obviously their powers aren't the same, but she does have kind of similar powers, they're not exactly the same, but they're, kind of similar, I guess. So
hers are more polarizing powers and he's more solar power.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it's kind of one of those things where I feel like, she can kind of give a perspective of, like, as somebody similar to you, I struggled here at first. Like, even I ran away, but, like, I came back kind of type of thing, so.
Good question here from Mark from the chat. What's the difference between Jubilee and Dazzler regarding powers? That's a good question. I don't actually know the top of my head, because they do seem similar in a way. Yeah, we'll have to check on that one and come back to that. But yeah, that's a good question. Anyone else knows in the chat, let us know. Because I can't think of the top of my head, because they are very similar in powers. Moving on to the news. Let's start off with the X97 news. Via the Hollywood Reporter, Marvel Studios has reportedly parted ways with X-Men 97 creator Bo DeMaio, following a weekend where DeMaio deleted his Instagram, where he had often provided updates for the upcoming series. He basically was let go right before the premiere happened. So, which is interesting. Yeah. So he must have, and it's been quiet and it's been quick. So I don't know if something happened on set. I don't know if something happened on his social media account. I do know he was sharing stuff on like the new set on the upcoming stuff, because I'd followed him and we're getting some of those updates from him. I wonder if he was sharing too much, possibly. I don't know, but it was quiet and quick. The news also says he reportedly completed writing season 2 for X97 and was discussing ideas for season 3 before getting fired. Now, I don't know what he did, and I can speak to that, but so far, the first 2 episodes and the tone of this, and if they're written through season 2, I think they're in pretty good shape. We'll probably see the impact of that when season 3 comes out, since that wasn't done yet. But hopefully with this change, there's no other changes in the future seasons as far as the way it's written and how it's handled. But yeah, I'm not going to speculate. Brad Winterbaum, the exec producer of X97, and he works at, one of the Marvel execs, was discussing ideas. Has released his first statement after creator Bo DeMaio's firing. He said he did excellent work writing seasons 1 and 2. I can't wait for the fans to see the series. The entire team came together to a creative revival worthy of the X-Men's 60-year legacy, from Stan and Jack to Claremont to Leewald. We are all truly standing on the shoulders of giants. So really didn't say anything, went the whole PR route with, the release of Bo DeMaio. Yep. So yeah, there is some stuff out there. I don't know what's true or not. I'm not going to speculate. I'll just leave it out as it is, and we'll kind of go from there. Marvel Studios news, via Dinner RPK, Marvel Studios are reportedly trying to take less risk and focusing on more guaranteed hits. Movies like Captain Marvel 3 or Ant-Man 4 won't happen. See, this kind of news is kind of weird to me about this because Captain Marvel 3 is like one of the most popular streaming movies on streaming right now on Disney Plus, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I felt the strike, the rescheduling, that kind of stuff, because the Marvels is a great film, and I would want to see a Captain Marvel 3, whether it's the Civil War idea we talked about, or whether it's you know, bringing Mystique and Destiny and Rogue and set up for Captain Marvel getting severely injured, and then you got Monica and Kamala in the middle, and it starts off the whole mutants versus X-Men thing, or mutants versus Avengers type of thing. You know, in that route, you know, there's so many ways you could do that, and seeing Rogue and on screen fighting Carol would be pretty cool. But you know, it wasn't, if you look at it now, just because it wasn't a hit in the box office, and with the way of streaming is now, where everyone's starting to wait for streaming to happen and they're watching that, you guys are looking at the streaming statistics too, not just the box office, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for that movie was the most hurt probably of any movie releasing at that time from the strike, because of the simple fact that it literally like released like the day or the day before that they lifted the strike, and everybody could kind of go out and start promoting stuff again. So it was either the day of or the day after that the strike lifted, and it was just like, it was one of those things where it was like, you know, they couldn't really promote that movie. They couldn't have somebody like, you know, like basically go out there and just talk about what that movie was, how great it was for them. And yeah, I mean, like it stinks, because at the end of the day, I feel like, you know, there is a big shift that is moving towards streaming, where it's like, why pay to go see a movie in theaters when I can just keep paying the same amount that I pay every month for my streaming service and see it in a month or two when it comes out on streaming. And I think a lot of that debate is just that like movies make it to streaming too quick out of movie theaters. It's like, as soon as like a movie doesn't really do well in a movie theater, it's like, well, we'll just get it on streaming a little bit quicker, is how it feels sometimes, you know, and get some views out of it there. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Like, I definitely think streaming has really changed the game for the box office. But it's just one of those things where it's like, for Disney, we all know that those movies are going to come to streaming within probably like 2 months every time.
40, I think like 45 days around that time. Yeah.
So something like that. So it's like, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, it's going to be there. So I don't know. Like I said, I think it was kind of hurt by the strike, and I think it was also kind of hurt by streaming, to be honest. And we've all gotten used to that at this point, where it's like streaming, it's always going to be there. You know, if it's a DC movie, it'll be on HBO at some point, or excuse me, Max at some point, you know. So
yeah, like I saw pretty much all the newer, except for, I think pretty much all the newer, except for whatchamacallit, I saw twice in the theater, Blue Beetle. All the rest of the DC movies lately, I've waited for streaming. Aquaman, The Flash, all those I waited for streaming for. So yeah.
Which,
go ahead.
Which, I'll just say this, like, Aquaman wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was like you said earlier, like it was some good, clean family fun, like for a movie, you know. Yeah. So I enjoyed it.
More on that news about projects. Eternals 2 is reportedly no longer in development. You know, and we got that whole cliffhanger with Star Fox at the end of Eternals. But reportedly, the Eternals sequel has evolved into another project. So what that means is probably we're kind of getting some kind of team up movie. They're going to show up in other films. So I'm all for that. I want to see what happens from that Star Fox cliffhanger. I want to see, you know, what happens with the judgment of Ereshkigal of the three that were still on Earth. I also want to see, because some of them end up being part of the Avengers team. Like, I know for a fact Cersei was an Avenger at one point. So I want to see them involved, whether it's a cosmic project. You know, maybe it's something to do with Star-Lord, maybe because he's a son of an Eternal.
That's what I want to see. I want to see them do something with Star-Lord, just because it's one of those things. Since he's come back to Earth, there's a giant celestial sticking out of the planet. Not only that, we know, even though I don't really like how they did it, and I think a lot of fans aren't really the most pleased with him being part celestial and Ego being a celestial, but, you know, it's one of those things. It's like, we're here now, we have that, we can use that and kind of build off of it. And it would be really interesting, like, if he more or less, like, had the Eternals, like, kind of rope him in being like, hey, you defeated a Celestial, like being Ego. Why don't you help us defeat Airshine?
Airshine, yeah.
And yeah, like, and then we can also get that terrible joke that I know they would make in that movie about Star Lord, Star Fox, like, you know, and it would be one of those like kind of weird things. But I think like where the first Eternals ended, it kind of leaves them in that place where they were on Earth. Like, even though like they're talking to Star Fox, he could hear about him defeating Ego, and that could be like a part, and they could kind of move forward. I don't think a lot of comic fans would be probably the most pleased with that kind of thing, but you know, I think it works with what we've got in the MCU so far.
Another one could be a Nova Project as well. Like, you know, they find Richard Rider out in space, or they run into him, and you know, he becomes an ally, and that's part of the whole story. And it's Eternals with Nova and that kind of thing too. Or we get the whole buddy cop thing with Star-Lord and Nova, and them helping the Eternals out. So eventually see how they show up. The other part too is that we could see possibly Cersei and Blade, because we know that she knows the whole history of the Whitman family. She knows about the Ebony Blade. She had the whole thing, you know, from his uncle. She kind of played on that kind of stuff within the Eternals. So maybe we see her show up in Blade, you know, because I completely think that they're going to tie the Ebony Blade to the Vampire Fang version in the comics. That was the fake Ebony Blade. I completely think they're going that route, because why else would you have Blade show up? You know, with the whole Blade storyline, I wouldn't be surprised if Lilith has it at some point. If we see one of Dane's relatives in Blade, or that kind of stuff. But I think they're going that route with it, and being tied to more of the darker side of things with it. So that's one thing to keep an eye on too.
That's definitely.
Via Agents of Fandom, Brad Winterbaum confirms that despite being removed from the release schedule, both Ironheart and Wonder Man are still happening or in the process of being edited. We're editing both of those shows as we speak. They're spectacular. They're amazing. They're different. We're able to explore corners of the universe that are really exciting. I can't talk. Riri Williams is one of them, and I cannot wait for people to meet Simon Williams. So there you go. You know, I know with the whole thing out from the earnings call and Iger saying that they've quietly canceled some projects in the background. Those projects are most likely projects they haven't even started yet, or projects that were in early development, not projects that were this far into development. Also, Brad Winterbaum via comicbook.com got candid about the studio's release strategy. There was a mandate to kind of create as much as we could for Disney Plus as quickly as we could. And then there was a shift. All of a sudden, we have to start spreading our release dates out, so that really accounts for a lot of delays. Now we're using that time. We're not sitting idle. So it's like it stays in the oven. You can bake certain things a little more. It's actually, I think, ultimately, it's only going to make things better. But most of it is just, frankly, shrapnel from the business. So there you go. That makes sense too, especially with the delay of Ironheart and making that tied to Armor Wars. And I think they're kind of changing what Armor Wars is going to be about from what's happened in the MCU so far. So I don't mind taking time and getting things right, you know, but don't try to always stay in your projects to be the big three, you know. Try to spread things out, because we want to see other characters too, and other characters do play important roles in these stories also.
I also think the most interesting thing about Armor Wars 2 is, as Tony said in, what was it, Iron Man 2, that, you know, all these countries were 10, 15 years away from making Iron Man like suits and everything. Now we're about like 15 years later, so like, you know, it's like, okay, like it's gonna be really interesting. Like, they can totally just make that like an Armor Wars movie, and have Rhodey and Riri involved if they really wanted to, kind of just, you know, move forward. And yeah, I mean, like, I think that would be a great kind of thing. It kind of piggybacks off Iron Man 2, but at the same time, it lets like a character like Rhodey get his own movie or his own project and kind of really go out there, because I love War Machine. I love Don Cheadle as War Machine. I'm so happy that they changed the actor on that one, because I like him better than Terrence Howard.
I agree.
You know, so it's just, he's funny, and it's not like an over-the-top humor. He's just like a real kind of dude, you know? So...
And maybe the first person he goes after is Riri Williams, right? Because they're both MIT. Tony was MIT. She did have Stark Tech in Wakanda Forever, some plans and that kind of stuff. So either, you know, Tony kind of let her in through some series of things he had at MIT, or she got in her own way. Rhodey goes after her, comes and finds out, oh, hey, you know, you're not so bad. Maybe Wakanda gets involved and says, hey, she's good with us. She should be good with you. And he's like, hey, you can be my ally. You can help me out. Let's go do this. And it's them two on missions out there trying to get that from other countries. Maybe we see a whole thing with, what's the, Venko?
Oh, Ivan Vanko.
Yeah. What's his dad?
Whiplash.
Anton. Not
Oh,
Whiplash.
Anton.
But what was his,
Crimson Dynamo.
Thank you, Crimson Dynamo type figure out there, and we see other things, so that'd be interesting to see too as well. A Disney investor has spoken out via Financial Times, and what he said is not very good in my opinion. He basically hints at questions around Kevin Feige's abilities and need for Black Panther's all-black cast. I'm just like, do you even know what the comics are about and the source material they're pulling from and where they're going with this? But he basically, some quotes here from this article. Disney is stupid because I'm not trying to fire executive Bob Iger. I want him to help. We don't fire CEOs. He also was quoted saying, they say we know nothing about the movie business. We don't claim we do, but I don't think they do. With 5 big losers in a row, they've lost first place in animation. They lost first place in features. Maybe it's time to change management in those divisions. I don't think Marvel's ever been first place in animation, first of all. DC has kind of always had the upper leg in animation. But what has been a success, X-97 is going to be a success. I'm pretty sure when Zombies comes out, which I have some news on that, that's going to be a success. So animation, I don't see a problem here. Now, saying there were 5 big losers in a row, was Captain Marvel really a loser? 3 was... What else has come out since then? I think, Quantum Mania still made money. If I'm not sure that it's from a $1 billion franchise, but they all still made money. I need to double check, but I don't think there was 5 losers in a row. I don't think there's been 5 movies out.
Unless that's like going all the way back to like Guardians of the Galaxy. Right?
And that wasn't a loser either.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, yeah.
I'm a little bit confused on that myself, but
yeah. But then he was asked about firing Kevin Feige, which I'm just like, that would be a mistake too of its own. I'm not ready to say that, but I question his record. I'm just like, okay, this movie, they've made like over $30 billion is in the MCU. So his record's been pretty good. Not every movie is a $1 billion franchise, but they're all pretty much have helped to the cause of this. So I'm trying to figure out why he's questioning Kevin Feige's record. People go to watch a movie or a show to be entertained. They don't go to get a message. Why do I have a Marvel that's all women? Not that I have anything against women, but why do I have to do that? Why can't I have Marvels that are both? Why do I need an all-black cast? First of all, do you understand the culture and everything about Wakanda and the message from the comics around from the X-Men and all the things they've done in the comics and the source material? This just seems like this person is more worried about the money and is out of touch. It almost sounds like, I'm surprised he didn't say the magic woke word as part of this as well, because the Marvels was not an all-female cast. It was female-led, but we still had like Nick Fury in there. So it's not like we didn't have another big person tying into it. But what was wrong with the Marvels? There was nothing wrong with the Marvels. It was that was a story about them.
Which it's funny, even with like the Nick Fury and the Marvels, like I don't really think we needed a lot of Nick Fury's parts in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like you could have cut that out. Almost.
You could have easily had a blue Marvel in here instead of Nick Fury and had him tied to the whole Sword, or is it Sword Now? Yeah, Sword Now organization, and kind of been a surrogate for Fury in the film and still been called the Marvels. I think at some point they need to introduce the blue Marvel, but other than that, it's like, I thought that was great the way it was led. And it's like, you have more than one demographic out here, and you need to make sure that you're making things target those other demographics also.
Yeah, it's a very weird complaint.
But and also too, Wakanda Forever wasn't all black cast either. They had 2 different cultures in that film primarily, and you have Everett Ross, who was a big mainstay. You had Val, who was a big mainstay in the film. It's like,
and then you've also got in the second one the villain is Namor, and that's like that was a huge character in the Black Panther franchise.
Their whole telecons, that's the demographic I was talking about. You actually opened up a door to a whole other demographic with telecon and Namor and his people in that. So I'm just like, where's he going with this?
Yeah, it's very strange.
Yeah, so this basically sounds like he's echoing Ike. Remember Ike Perlmutter? Perlmutter? I can't remember say his name properly. His thoughts on Marvel before, he literally stopped Feige from making movies revolving around non-white characters. this sounds like the same sentiment of that guy that used to be at Marvel and Disney. That's not there anymore. So Disney was asked about these statements from him. So they asked about these remarks from Peltz. The guy's name is the investor is Nelson Peltz, is the investor that we're talking about. Disney was asked about Nelson Peltz's remarks, and Disney's responded. A spokesperson said, "This is exactly why Nelson Peltz shouldn't be anywhere near a creative-driven company." So yeah, but those, he's more worried about the bottom line, which Disney Plus is starting to turn things around, from where they were. These movies are still making money. I'm just like, I don't see what the problem is. Not everything's gonna be $1 billion hit. So, anyways, on some better news. D23 is gonna be August 9th through 11th in Anaheim, California this year. So maybe we'll get some actual footage of new projects, some cast shown, that kind of stuff. Hopefully they've learned from the lesson about showing things way too far in the future and kind of stick to the slate they know what's coming out. Also, too, we're a few months out from Deadpool 3. Back to the Peltz statements. That's going to probably be $1 billion plus franchise. Deadpool 3. So, anyways.
That movie might make $1.5 billion. I think that movie's going to make a lot. People have been wanting. And the funny thing about the Deadpool, we'll say, franchise is the first 2 movies have been riddled with him making the joke that he wants to be with Wolverine.
Yep.
And now they did that for a 3rd movie. So it's like, you couldn't, and it just so happens that 2nd movie ended with him doing time travel stuff, and then now we've got the TVA. So it's like everything lined up so well. So it's like, I feel
like he knew.
Yeah. I mean, I almost feel like it's going to be a home run for them, ultimately, but we'll see. But I mean, I just think that movie is going to do well regardless. Everybody loves Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Everybody loves Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. So
I won't be surprised if that's their first $2 billion plus movie.
Yeah.
I think Spider-Man came close, but it was still under 2 billion. It was like 1.8 or 1.9. I think Spider-Man Far From Home did. So
yeah,
I won't be surprised this is their first $2 billion movie.
Yeah.
Nova news. Nova is in early development for the MCU, confirms Marvel Studios head of streaming, television, and animation. Brad Wonderbaum says this. So Nova's coming. It's been, I wonder if that's where they met with Ryan Gosling about, is the Nova role, I still think Fall Guy looks good. I want to see Fall Guy, and when I look at Fall Guy, I'm just like, he could play a Johnny Blaze and do the whole stunt stuff like they did in the first movie.
And
possibly.
He's married to Eva Mendes, who was in the first Ghost Rider movie. So I mean, she could definitely give him some pointers. But I like him. I would like to see him as Danny Ketch and not Johnny Blaze. But personally, I feel like we've gotten Johnny Blaze so many different times. Like, give it to a different Ghost Rider. We finally got Robbie Reyes there.
The best thing about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yes, the best thing.
That was such a good season. That scene where they shoot the car with the RPG and the car flips and lights on fire and then lands and takes off. Oh, dude, that's such a good scene. And yeah, I really liked him as Ghost Rider too. But there's been so many different people who have been Ghost Riders, so we don't have to focus on Johnny Blaze.
Yep.
But I feel like that's where we always end up somehow. So really hoping they do something a little bit different there and go Danny Ketch or maybe somebody else.
I love to see if they do a Ghost Rider movie, is they kind of do how in the Thor movies they have the history lessons with Odin. Maybe we have someone do a history lesson of the Ghost Riders, and they show Kushala and they show all the Ghost Riders through history, and then we get a glimpse of Robbie Reyes, and all of a sudden we see Moon Knight still on the Hell Charger, and that's all we see, and then it comes on and it goes into whatever Ghost Rider they have in the MCU. I think that would kind of be pretty cool to kind of expose people who don't read the comics to the different Ghost Riders out there.
And I know Robbie Reyes has got that whole thing where he's possessed by the serial killer kind of thing, and it's a little bit different. But I mean, honestly, at this point, we kind of got sort of that in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. thing. I think they could kind of just go a different route and just make him an actual real Ghost Rider, somebody. And yeah, they could totally give us a few Ghost Riders in the future of the MCU, and I don't think it would be a problem, especially with the multiverse stuff happening. So
they have multiple on screen teaming up, Remember that, and I always talk about Moon Knight Annual #1, where we get the different Moon Knights across time fighting Kang. What if we got a scene like that of different Ghost Riders fighting the villain of the Ghost Rider film? That'd be kind of cool to see on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, my dream is I want to see Vengeance as the villain, and I want to see like a movie where like whoever it is, we'll say Danny Ketch, keeps believing that he's turning into Ghost Rider and causing all this chaos, and it's like Vengeance framing him. And then it's like a psychological kind of thriller type thing. And then at the end of the movie, like basically like he realizes he kind of like comes to terms with the Rider. And then he realizes that this whole time that it was really Vengeance like framing him and people thought it was him. And then him and Vengeance square off and he beats Vengeance. And yeah.
It's almost like a Fight Club, Tyler Durden, Cornelius type situation, right?
Yeah. Cause
that'd be kind of cool.
I feel like the Ghost Rider is kind of like this thing where it's like, you know, until you really kind of come to terms with it, like you're like almost afraid of it and don't really like want to believe that it's like inside of you and it's there, right? Like, so it's one of those things where it's like you don't really like the way that they did the Ghost Rider on screen in those Nicolas Cage movies was so weird because they went from like, you know, it was like locked up inside of him for multiple years in that second movie, and it looked like when it came out it was like just nuts. It was ready to just like, you know, attack
ham.
Yeah, like it was raring to go. And that's kind of like the thing about like the Ghost Rider is I feel like, you know, I like that ideal of like the host not like wanting to believe what he sees and what he thinks is happening kind of type of thing, you know. And it could be just one of those things where it's like the Ghost Rider is going out every night like taking on Vengeance and getting framed for stuff because it's Vengeance that he's after, and then like, you know, Danny Ketch like not want to come to terms with that. And it'd be one of those things where I feel like it'd be a slightly different spin than we got on the Ghost Rider in those Nicolas Cage movies, which was, you know, interesting.
Another cool idea. Have you seen the movie Memento?
No, I don't think
where he has like short-term memory loss, so he can't make new memories. And so he has like tattoos on himself and people telling him things. He's trying to put things together like a detective, and he doesn't know who he can trust, who he can't trust, and that kind of stuff. His wife was killed. And in the killing of his wife is where I think he got injured where he couldn't remember things and make new memories, and he had to like tattoo himself, take notes. That'd be kind of cool thing to do with that idea you're doing, is that like he thinks these are happening, but he doesn't know. And so he's trying to pull the pieces together, and it's kind of almost like a detective type thing. And then at the end, he comes to terms and fights them. So that'd be kind of cool. It'd be like a mix of Memento and Fight Club type thing in that kind of movie.
And imagine like he wakes up and like his door has like a scorch mark on it or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, how did this happen? Like, you know, like things like that. Like I could just see that being like an interesting kind of thing. It's almost like a backwards horror movie in a way, you know, kind of type of thing. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think the Ghost Rider, there's just so much opportunity to do something different with multiple different characters. So why not, like, do it with multiple different characters? Like, let's see more than Johnny Blaze.
And I like it to mention, you know, kind of like a horror film type of thing, you know, kind of the dark side, because I think Marvel needs to kind of flesh out the darker side of the MCU. And I think so far, well, what they did with Moon Knight was kind of cool, and because Moon Knight can definitely be a part of this. What we saw with Werewolf by Night and so that stuff. So I think they definitely can do this. And with Blade coming up, I think they can kind of keep that to its own area of the MCU, and not necessarily has to cross over with anything else right now. So, Spider-Man animated series. Brad Winderbaum, I'm potentially having the Spider-Man animated series back after X-97. You never know is the answer. And I think if they don't ride the wave of this and bring back other animated things like Spider-Man the animated series as the next one, and then move on to things like Avengers Assemble, Earth Mightiest Heroes. I'm like, you got to kind of keep this, because this animated side, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with it. And you can also attract, again, a different demographic as well, because not all of the stuff you're going to do in live action is going to be for all ages. Like Deadpool is not going to be for kids. We know that. But the animated stuff can be, and that's also going to help things on the streaming side as well. So,
yeah, I mean, both those Avengers cartoons were legendary. They were some of like the top tier animation that I think they've done for Marvel. They were so good, and I think the animated universe gives like things like the MCU the opportunity to basically tell all these other stories that they don't have to try and like spend so much money to tell.
Yep.
They can just animate it, and like with animation, you don't have to worry about everybody like having a lot of screen time and everything. Everybody can share the screen time equally, and it's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think a lot of those Avengers cartoons like get it right, is especially those two, Earth's Mightiest Heroes and what is the other one?
Avengers Assemble.
Avengers Assemble, thank you. But yeah, like I think that's where they get it right, is like it never focuses too much on one character throughout that show. They do a really good job of doing the balancing act for everybody. So
speaking of Spider-Man is back on the big screen, so you can watch all 8 live action movies. So all 3 Maguire movies, both Andrew Garfield movies, and all 3 MCU Spider-Man. What's the actor's name?
Tom Holland.
Yes, thank you. And all 3 Tom Holland movies. They'll be in select theaters beginning April 15th. So next month, you can rewatch all 8 of those movies.
Wow.
So, yep. Speaking of more Spider-Man stuff, Spider-Verse short. Sony will release a new animated short titled The Spider Within, a Spider-Verse story on Sony Pictures Animation's YouTube channel, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific time on March 27th. So that's going to happen this Wednesday. It will follow Miles Morales as he struggles to balance his responsibilities as a teenager, friend, student, and Spider-Man. In navigating those pressures, Miles experiences a panic attack that forces him to confront the manifestations of his anxiety and learn that reaching out for help can be just as brave an act as protecting his city from evil. So that's pretty good. That's a nice message out there for...
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. What was that? My thing just jumped. Okay, we talked about X-97 already. X-Men news. Via Daniel RPK, Mr. Sinister is reportedly going to be the main antagonist of the MCU X-Men reboot. So we're going to get him on live screen. They've kind of teased him a little bit, especially in Logan and other projects. We really never got him.
Yeah.
So...
New Mutants too. He was
yeah.
Too, so...
Shang-Chi sequel, via Dana RPK. Shang-Chi 2 reportedly start filming in 2025, featuring time travel and Iron Fist will be involved. Now, this is interesting because that name been out there floating around for a while, Shang-Chi and the Wreckage of Time. But also, too, we're going to get Iron Fist. And I don't know if this will be the same one from the Netflix series, since that's all canon now. If it's going to be... Yeah, different time. If it's going to be Calling Wing, maybe. So yeah, I'm interested to see what Iron Fist is going to be the new one. Was it Lin Lu? It was a new Iron Fist, I think, recently. In the comics.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it's Lin Lu. So I'm interested to see where they do with this, or does he see him back in time? A time travel part thing, and bring him into modern times. So interesting to see. Or do we find out that I'm going blank today again. The city they protect, Iron Fist protects.
Oh, Kunlun.
Yes, Kunlun. Do we find out that Kunlun is one of the ancient cities of heaven? Like we got talked about in Shang-Chi, and that something happened to it, and then they have to go back in time to stop whatever destroys Kunlun to get Iron Fist and bring Iron Fist in modern day. That'd be an interesting storyline there. So.
Yeah, and I'd also like to see Orson Randall as an Iron Fist. They have so many opportunities. They could even do an Iron Fist of one time and an Iron Fist of another time if they really wanted to. That would be really cool. But yeah, I mean, interested to see what they do with that. I think going one of the ancient 7 cities would be probably pretty spot on for that. That's the way that, it felt very much like Kunlun in Shang-Chi when we watched that movie, that city with the dragon and everything. Very similar kind of idea. We know you have to defeat the dragon to get the Iron Fist. So boom, it's set up perfectly. They can just kind of mirror something like that and go forward. And I think it would kill. It'd do excellent.
Agatha series. So if you look at the website on Disney Plus, it's no longer Agatha anything, it's just Agatha now. So we've gone through what Agatha all along, Agatha Covenant of Chaos, something else, but the website is now refers to it as Agatha and says it's coming soon. So
interesting.
Deadpool via Daniel RPK. Marvel Studios reportedly really impressed with Sean Levy's work in Deadpool and Wolverine, and they want him to return for more projects.
Huh.
Give us a Taskmaster film.
The one for Black Widow?
No. No.
Not that one.
Yeah, I want to see a straight up Tony Masters. Like the whole original idea was for the first Deadpool movie, but they couldn't use him because of rights. Mm-hmm. So we got Ajax in there instead. You know, I want to see like a straight up Mercs film, you know, with Deadpool and Taskmaster and that kind of stuff. And I think that'll be a fun film, even if it's a Disney Plus series or whatever. I just want to see Tony Masters. That's my favorite Marvel villain at times. Other stuff, you know, it'd be kind of a cool film. Take the recent Taskmaster series, but change out some characters to put Deadpool in there. Like for example, Deadpool could take Nick Fury's role in that comic series. Deadpool could take not Maria Hill's, but Black Widow's role in that series. I would love to see that comic series become live action, because that fight with Hyperion, you know, and maybe just have Deadpool in there and showing, you know, commentating and making jokes while he's fighting Hyperion, playing rope-a-dope, you know, getting his butt kicked and stuff. That whole fight with the Wakandan forces, special forces that he did, was pretty cool. But yeah, I'd love to see him do something like that and bring Deadpool, bring Deadpool and Taskmaster together, Tony Master's Taskmaster together, and so forth.
I was thinking about something today while I was watching X-Men. I was like, wouldn't it be funny if they put Deadpool like in this show and they had Ryan Reynolds voice Deadpool like for that? Like, I feel like it would be pretty acceptable. Like, you know, like if they went without him voicing Deadpool, I feel like people would probably still like it. But if Ryan Reynolds was really like the voice of Deadpool in animation, and I don't think that would be like something that he would turn down doing. An animated character for Deadpool. Like, he loves playing that character. So, you know.
I still wonder who that one actor is voicing that they haven't released yet. There's been some speculation that he's voicing someone that is going to be surprised, possibly Spider-Man, because Spider-Man did have crossover in X-Men. So, but I wonder who that actor is going to voice, and hopefully we find out sooner than later.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Via Dinner RPK also, Deadpool and Wolverine reportedly introduced a new multiverse concept to the MCU. The concept, in every universe, there's one specific hero that if they die or get removed from the universe, that entire universe would vanish. Each universe has a different hero. Nexus being anyone?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, this sounds like, you know, we already have two of them already that we've seen in the MCU. We have Man-Thing, who's no, he's not one, but he's the protector of Nexus, or of realities, isn't he?
I think so.
Yeah, and then we have Agatha, who's definitely a Nexus being, or not Agatha, Wanda. No, Agatha, Wanda. Yeah, Wanda. Sorry, I'm just having a bad day today. Wanda, who's one. I wonder if this is gonna set up Molecule Man, especially with the change in the MCU of Kang. You know, all reports that Kang is still being involved, but what if this person is setting up, or this is setting up Molecule Man in the MCU, and someone gets control of him to set that bomb off?
Yeah, and that like destroys the multiverse kind of type of thing. Yeah, I mean, that could totally work. I also like the idea of them making Wanda that kind of replacement, just because of the simple fact of, I mean, we've seen that there's other versions of Wanda throughout like the multiverse that look like her. I sometimes wonder if the Nexus beings are going to all look exactly the same, and that's kind of like one of those things where it's like the reason why it's a Nexus being is because they're like the same, unchanged across all realities. But yeah, I think that this is going to be something. It just sounds too much like it, right? Like, you know. So.
Because look at Maria Rambeau. We know from Multiverse of Madness that she's Captain Marvel in one universe, and we found out in the Marvels, another one, she's binary. The X-Men. So, and then in the main universe, she's just a regular person. So, you know, and then we have the whole thing with Reed Richards. You know, who he's John Krasinski in one universe in 838, but in the main universe he's gonna be Pedro Pascal. So yeah, interesting to keep an eye on. Venom 3 has been officially titled Venom: The Last Dance. So
weird.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll wait to see what comes. You know what happens. But we have a new release date too. So we're getting it sooner. October 25th of this year, we'll get Venom 3.
Okay.
So, Blade via Variety. Aaron Pierre confirms he is no longer involved in Blade as the project moved in a different direction. Now, I thought he was playing was it Afari? I believe is the real version of Whistler in the comics. If I remember correctly, I think it's Afari, the one they based Whistler off of in the movies with Wesley Snipes. I thought that probably his role in the movie was Afari, honestly. So, which is interesting to see what happens now. I don't think it's a period piece anymore, from what I gathered either. So I don't think it's gonna be back in the 1920s anymore. So interesting to see what happened with this. I hope the tracks get rolling, because this movie's been delayed and delayed, and it seems like a decade ago that we got Mahershala Ali on stage, and they don't seen Blade. So
yeah, it's gonna be another decade by the time we ever even get probably like a second movie or anything at this rate, is what it feels like. And it's like, I would love to see a Blade trilogy, but I'm like, man, we can't even get this first movie. Like, are we gonna get any more? Like, and especially with like the multiverse, like, you know, if there's like a potential reset, like, does he continue to play that? Like, how long does it take for that second movie to play into that and everything? Yeah, it's definitely, we could have been working on the second Blade movie right now and be about to come out with that in the amount of time that you know it's taken us just to not even have one yet. So
Agatha, I'm back on Agatha news. I forgot to mention something. Brad Wunderbaum talked about Agatha. He said, moving forward, our next show out is Agatha, and there are parallels with two anti-heroes, Loki and Agatha. It is a different show, but it strives to plumb the same emotional depths as Loki. That's interesting. So, Eyes of Wakanda, the animated series produced by Ryan Coogler, will tell the story of brave warriors who, throughout Wakanda history, have been tasked to travel the world retrieving dangerous vibranium artifacts. Winterbaum also said via Men's Health is that Eyes of Wakanda fits right into our sacred MCU timeline continuity, so it's going to be canon. He also confirmed the series had been directed by Todd Harris. It's canon to the sacred timeline of the MCU and may feature an Iron Fist. So this has been rumored for a while about Iron Fist, and that wasn't entirely what Brad said, but there's rumors out there about Iron Fist being involved again. So we could see multiple Iron Fists in the MCU, like you mentioned.
interesting.
Brave New World. Via Radio Times, Anthony Mackie is disappointed that Captain America Brave New World won't include Sebastian Stan and Daniel Bro. Basically says, when they decided to go back to the movies, it is what it is, but I don't have any friends anymore, so it kind of dampens it a little bit. Which, you know, I wish they would have brought at least Bucky back, but I don't know. I almost feel like Bucky's going to have something happen to him in Thunderbolts. Or Bucky's going to go off and, you know, similar to what Logan in First Class, you know, kind of tell them to leave him alone, and, you know, not in so nice terms. And maybe we get Bucky as the Nomad in the MCU.
That'd be cool.
I hope they don't kill him in Thunderbolts.
Yeah, it feels like that to me. It feels like he's gonna die. I feel like he's gonna get like made an example out of by like somebody like Sentry, and Sentry's gonna come in, rip his arm off, and kill him.
Yeah.
And everybody's gonna be like caught off guard. But as like brutal and as like terrible as I think that would be, I just think it's just a waste of like a character that really should have more story. Like, it doesn't feel like we should be at the end of his story right now. You know.
It also sounds like we're not getting a second season of Falcon the Winter Soldier either.
Yeah.
So, which that makes sense. The story kind of wrapped up nicely. He's Captain America now. Let's focus on Captain America stories. Marvel Zombies, Brad Winterbaum via IGN says the show for sure is TVMA. Will be a pretty intense TVMA animated series. What's so great about the comics was it not pulling its punches. That's certainly what we're going for. So it sounds like Zombies is gonna be lit. I'm looking forward to it. A TVMA animated Marvel project, which I'm kind of sad that him saying this, we didn't get that Spider-Man episode in What If, because that would give us a taste of what Marvel is doing for a TVMA in animated series. So
yeah, I mean, I like that episode of What If. So like, you know, and I also like how they kind of use them in the future too in another episode of season 1. So personally, I kind of really look forward to that. Is that going to come out around like Halloween or something? I feel like that would be like a good Halloween kind of you know.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's this year. I think it's this year. I think the plan was for it to be this year. I got to double check the schedule. I thought last time we mentioned the schedule that it was coming out this year. So it sounds like it's done. So
Okay. Hmm.
I'm sure if we don't get anything between now and the summertime, maybe at D24, they'll announce it. So,
Okay.
Marvel filming updates. Wonder Man appears to be wrapped. Daredevil is still filming it in New York City. Thunderbolts is still filming in Atlanta. Captain America 4 will restart when the script is done because they're still doing rewrites. Possibly May, but that's gonna be Atlanta as well. Fantastic Four will be this summer in the UK. Blade will be late this year in the UK. Armor Wars is 2025. Shang-Chi is 2025. Avengers 5, we don't know yet. We got a new Star Wars trailer, The Acolyte. That's going to be out June 4th. The Batman Part 2 will now release on October 2nd, 2026. Production will begin in early 2025. The script isn't ready due to recent strikes, so that's the delay in the film. And also, there's with everything being back in full swing after the strikes, there's lack of available filming stages as well right now. So 2026. Teen Titans though is getting a live action movie. There is one in the works. We don't have any kind of date or any kind of other information, but it's announced. It sounds like, and we're gonna get the Teen Titans in the DCU.
Very cool. I've seen this fan cast and I really like it, but I would love to see Jenna Ortega as Raven.
Ooh.
I think that would be really, really cool if they did something like that. And I just hope that Beast Boy turns into more animals than he did in the TV show. So, yeah.
I wonder how they're going to handle what's his name, Cyborg. I wonder how they're going to handle that with the whole thing they did from the DCU and Ray Fisher. I wonder if they'll have Cyborg in there as part of their team as well. My son's excited. I told him about this. He's all excited. He watched all the cartoons, and so.
Yeah, I feel like it's weird too because, like, you know, before we had Cyborg as kind of like he wasn't part of the Teen Titans. He was with the Doom Patrol and the most recent, you know, DC Universe stuff that they were making, which I love the Doom Patrol TV show, and there's nothing wrong with including Cyborg in there, but I would have put him with the Teen Titans, and Cyborg's definitely a character that you need some CGI for, and I feel like Doom Patrol kind of was more practical effects, so it was one of those things where it was like we got a practical effect Cyborg, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hope that they do like a team kind of like the animated show with like maybe like Starfire, Robin, Beast Boy, Cyborg, Raven, maybe throw little Kid Flash in there, maybe throw Aqualad or something, you know. They could also do it kind of like a weird spin. I don't know if you ever seen Young Justice TV show.
I have not.
Okay, Young Justice was a great show. It had a lot of characters in it. It would be like Justice Leaguers, Teen Titans, kind of like a little bit of everybody. But it was more of like focused on like the sidekicks and those people. But yeah, I mean, they could kind of play with the team a little bit and even throw in some additional characters in there. I think it would be a little bit different but interesting, you know, just based on, I think a lot of people love the animation. Like I like the original animation that they did for the Teen Titans show, and a lot of people like the second one that they did, the kind of more comedic one. But
was that Teen Titans Go? Was that one?
Yeah, that one. I think the original one was originally like Teen Titans Go, but I think when they did the animation, the first one was just called Teen Titans, and the second one was like Teen Titans Go, kind of. That was the one that I'm referring to is the one that had like Stan Lee briefly in it, where in that movie, the Teen Titans movie that they did. But yeah, the Teen Titans, that is just prime real estate right there. They have to do something solid with that, better than the TV show did. Because the TV show wasn't bad in the beginning, it just got worse, I think, as time went on, unfortunately. So,
Supergirl news. Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Scribe Anna Nogueira will write the screenplay via the Hollywood Reporter. So,
okay.
DCU filming updates. Superman is filming now in Atlanta. It will also film in Cleveland at some point. Peacemaker season 2 will film this summer, and then Waller will film sometime this year. Marvel Brothers. Mario Bros. Sequel movie is happening. It's gonna happen in April 3rd of 2026. We're gonna get a sequel to the Mario Bros. Movie. So
Interesting.
Ready Player 2. Steven Spielberg confirms Ready Player 2 is in the works.
Okay.
So I actually enjoyed Ready Player 1. I enjoyed that film. So it's good to see that. He will only produce the film.
Huh.
Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan, their secret film. We have more details. The secret film will be set in the 30s Jim Crow South. Is rumored to be about vampires going to war against the Ku Klux Klan. It's going to have a March 2025 release. This sounds like a Blade movie. This would be a great Blade movie, right?
Yeah.
That or a retake on Blackula, like I said before when I first thought it was a Blackula film. But I'm excited to see this. Coogler and Jordan back together again. Coogler has been around with Jordan a long time in a lot of films. I believe like one of Michael B. Jordan's like very first films that he was in, that Coogler did. So that Jordan like started in, that Coogler did as well. So that's pretty interesting. And last but not least, we have a Beetlejuice trailer. The juice is loose, right? So we Michael Keaton's back, Winona Ryder's back, her daughter is Jenna Ortega, Catherine O'Hara's back as the mom/grandma. We didn't see the dad. We did see a funeral though. So remember that's the funeral they're at, is the dad's funeral. But we didn't see, I don't think we're gonna see Baldwin or Gina Davis back in this film. But I'm not surprised we're not seeing Alec Baldwin, given that he's had some recent issues with that other movie and what's going on there and other things going on. And Gina Davis has kind of dropped out of the limelight. I haven't really seen her in much in the past recent years, so I wonder how they're gonna make that connection there. But William Dafoe will be in the film as well. So the trailer looked good. I'm looking forward to it. That's gonna be out later this year. So, Mark, are you still on with us in the chat? Because I have your answer about Dazzler versus Jubilee. So if you're in the chat, say something, and I'll tell you the difference. But if you're not in the chat, I'll tell you the difference anyway. And if you listen to the recording, you'll get it. So Dazzler is more light and sound, vibration manipulation, whereas Jubilee is more polarizing manipulation. And of course, Dazzler can skate and, music and all that kind of stuff too. So that's kind of the difference. Basically, just think of Dazzler as Taylor Swift.
I was just thinking that, but I didn't want to say it. I was just like literally sitting here thinking of that, like those people who would fan cast Taylor Swift as Dazzler and like put her in like a costume and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be funny if she was like Dazzler in like, say, the Deadpool movie or something like that, the third one, because she is friends with Ryan Reynolds and his wife. So like,
and there's that picture of her with the Deadpool costume. I think at one time she cosplayed as Deadpool also. So
he like let her borrow a costume or something.
Yeah,
like that, I think so. Yeah,
because it was one of the playoff games, or the Super Bowl, wasn't it? She was in the same suite at the Super Bowl with I believe like Sean Levy was there, Reynolds was there, Hugh Jackman was there, Taylor Swift was there, and so was what's his wife's name?
Blake Lively.
Yes, Blake Lively. Thank you. I'm going Blake. Man, I'm having a bad day today. I just need to go bed after this. But that's it for today. We'll be back next Sunday. Actually, maybe we'll see because it's Easter weekend here in the States. But either we'll be back next Sunday for episode 3 of X97, or we'll do the following weekend and do episodes 3 and 4. So we'll play it by ear. I'll talk to Alex. Hopefully we get our missed counterpart, Andy, back sometime soon. But yeah, that's all we have for today. Any closing thoughts, Alex?
No, I think we hit everything. So
okay, cool. Well, in that case, enjoy your week, and we will see you next time.
See you guys.